Like other programming languages, Python functions support variable argument lists. This makes it possible to build functions that have a high degree of flexibility by accepting different numbers of parameters. A good example of this might be an addition function that adds up the parameters passed to it. It would be pretty inconvenient to require callers of this function to have to conform to putting all the numbers into a list, right? So defining the function to accept a variable list of parameters would be the better way to go. To do this in Python, you define the function argument using an asterisk character in front of the parameter that you want to allow a variable length for. This parameter has to come after all the other positional parameters that the function defines. So for example, if we built a logging function that logged messages along with parameter values, we would maybe first define the parameters for the message type and then the message text, and then specify the variable argument list. All right, so let's try this out in our actual code. So here in chapter 2, let's open up var_args start. So let's define an addition function that takes a variable number of parameters. In the definition for the function, I'm going to add a parameter named args, and I'm going to put star in front of it. Now, this isn't required, right? The name args, it's just more of a convention among Python programmers. You can call it whatever you want. Inside the function, I'll create a variable to hold the result, and then iterate over each of the arguments to form the result. So I'll just say for arg in args, result plus equals arg. And then I'll just return the result. So let's go ahead and exercise this function. So I'll put some code here in main to try it out. Let's do some numbers, 5, 10, 15, and 20. And let's make a copy of that. And let's do something simpler. Let's do 1, 2, and 3. Let's go ahead and try this out. Let's bring up the terminal. And let's run this. And you can see that the function returns the sum of the values. Now, if you already have a list of values in a sequence, you can pass that to the function by putting an asterisk in front of the list name, right? So let's try that. So let's imagine I had a list. I've got, something like, my nums equals, and then inside these brackets, I'm just going to copy and paste these guys and put them in here. So now I have a sequence of numbers, and I want to pass this to my addition function. What I'm going to do is print out the addition result, and then I'm going to do what's called a literal unpacker. I'm going to unpack that sequence literal by putting a star in front of the argument and then just name the list. All right, so let's run this again. And you can see that the result there is in the output. Now, there's a potential drawback to using variable argument lists, and that is that if you decide later to change the function to add more positional parameters, then all of the callers of the function will have to change. So for example, if I go back and change the definition of this function to accept a numerical base argument, right, like this, now I have to change all the places where this function is used, right? And you can see, right, I'm going to try and run this, and it works, but the results are different, and now I'm getting an error in my output, okay? Because the function assumes that the first parameter is the base parameter, and my result is incorrect. So in general, variable arguments are useful when the number of parameters that your function expects is relatively small. It's a great way to add flexibility to your functions, but you do have to be careful and think ahead about how your code is going to be used.